Good evening. Welcome. Today we're learning about Parashat Tetzaveh, and we'll speak a little bit about Purim as well. We are on page 464 of Art Scroll Chumash. And since Thursday night is Purim, let's find a small connection between the Parsha and Purim. Most of the years, Parashat Tetzaveh falls in the same week as Purim. So what's the connection? And I'm sure there are many connections, but one particular one that I heard recently is the fact that on Purim we read the Megillat Esther. And in the Megillat Esther, very often it speaks about clothing. First, it describes the beautiful cloth that was used for the party that Achashverosh made. And then it spoke about the lack of clothing that Achashverosh wanted his wife to come with. Achashverosh ordered the Queen Vashti to come and present herself in front of everyone without any clothing. And then later it says that Mordechai, when he heard that the evil decree was made about the Jews, he removed his clothing and he put on sackcloth. And then it says that when Esther found out that Mordechai is wearing sackcloth, she sent for him a special set of clothing. And she begged him, please remove your sackcloth, put normal clothes on. And he didn't. And then it says that when King Achashverosh wanted to reward Mordechai for informing him of the plot of assassination, Haman gave him an idea. You should take royal garments, royal clothing that king himself wore, and put it on Mordechai. And Achashverosh said, exactly, that's an excellent idea. Do this to Mordechai. And Haman had to dress Mordechai with garments that King Achashverosh himself wore. And then it says, when time came for Esther to approach the King Achashverosh, to beg him to change the decree and to protect the Jews, she wore royal garments. And at the end of Megillah, it says that after Haman was killed and Mordechai was made the new prime minister instead of Haman, King Achashverosh gave him royal garments of blue wool. So throughout the Megillah, we read about clothing. We read about all kinds of clothing, lack of clothing, sackcloth, royal clothing. And this Parsha, Tetzaveh, almost entirely speaks about clothing. What kind of clothing? Special clothing of Kohanim, of priests. Kohen Gadol and Kohen Hediot, the great Kohen and regular Kohen. So what is so special about clothing? Why is Megillah speaking about clothing? And why do Kohanim need special clothing? What does clothing represent? So the sages of Kabbalah tell us that clothing compared to our body is similar to our body for our soul. Just like clothing covers and protects the body, so too our human body covers and protects the soul. That means that whenever we hear in Torah the word clothing, it's a sign for us that we're talking about physical body, and it is informing us that there is some kind of a discussion and connection, a hint to the process that happens between the soul and the physical body. So the physical body serves as a vehicle for the soul, which means the soul, being spiritual, cannot exist on its own in the physical world. It will escape. It cannot connect to it. It cannot operate within it. And in order for the soul to be able to accomplish, to be able to interact with the physical world, it needs a physical body. So the body is not bad. Unlike other philosophies, in Judaism, we view human body as holy. Why? Because it is a helper for the soul. Without the body, the soul would not be able to accomplish what it needs. So if the body is used to serve the soul, then the body is fulfilling its purpose, and then the body is holy, it's good. However, if the body ignores the soul and the person runs only after the desires of the body, then what happens is that the soul of a human being and the mind of the human being are serving the body. And then you're making out of secondary item, you're making primary item. So you're losing the whole purpose of creation of soul and the purpose of creation of the body. So Megillah is telling us there's a lot of concentration on the outer. There's a lot of discussion about the clothing. And if you think about the holiday of Purim, it's the same thing. We are covering ourselves with masks. What do masks represent? We put mask on top of our face, on top of our body, even on top of our clothing to hide ourselves, as if one layer of hiding is not enough. The body already hides the soul. The physical body already makes it look like there is no spirituality. And on top of the body, we put a mask. As in math, you have negative times negative gives you a positive. When we put a mask on top of our clothing and on top of our body, we are reminding ourselves and telling ourselves and others, don't think that the body is real. Don't think that the body is the main thing. I'm going to cover the body. I'm going to cover the clothing to remind us that there is something hiding behind the body. Don't look at the body and don't look at your clothing. Cover it. And that's exactly the message of Purim, and that's exactly the message of Megillah. The way it happened looked natural. All events looked like they're just political discussion, political events that are happening between the ministers and between the king and between the Jewish people, and there is a decree of a human minister against the Jewish nation. And the Megillah tells us it's all clothing, it's all a mask. From beginning till end, we speak about clothing, and it's in order to hint to us what you read in the Megillah, don't take it at its face value. There's something deeper. Remove the clothing, look deeper, and you will see that there is spiritual dimension. There is God behind the scenes who is running the show. And so when we now connect the Megillah to our Parsha, we find the same idea. Kohen Gadol has a special set of 8 garments. Kohen Hediot, a regular Kohen, has a special set of 4 garments. When they serve in Beit HaMikdash, they're supposed to remove their own clothing. Kohen Gadol is not allowed to serve in his own clothing. He has to serve in a specific set of clothing that is described in the Torah. If he is missing one of the garments, his service is nullified, it's invalid. If he adds another kind of article of clothing, his service is invalid. So again, the idea is that as a representative of the Jewish people in front of God, Kohen has to realize that my clothing has no meaning unless it is used in the service of God, unless I'm doing good things with it. My body has no meaning unless I'm doing spiritual pursuits with it. The body, like the horse, and the soul is like the rider. If the horse is controlled and directed by the rider, it gets to places. If the horse runs wild and the rider doesn't do anything, there is no accomplishment. The opposite, the horse might only break its feet and throw the rider off. So too, when the body is controlled by the soul, the body is accomplishing a lot, and the body is elevating itself and the whole world with it. But when the soul is not in control of the body runs wild and it damages itself and it damages the soul. And it may even cause early death from its wrong decisions. So Kohen, any Kohen, regular Kohen and Kohen Gadol, when they served in Beit HaMikdash, they had to serve without shoes, barefoot. Their feet, their naked feet, had to touch the marble floor of Beit HaMikdash. Why is that? And that is because shoes represent to a greater degree the body, even more so than clothing. Why? Because our sages say that the body only contains a small portion of the soul. Majority of the soul is above our body. Our body is like a shoe for the soul. Just like a shoe only contains the small part, the tiny part of the body, just the foot. Majority of the body is above the shoe, so too our physical body, like the shoe for the soul, only contains the lowest small part of the soul. Majority of the soul is above. By the way, that is why both men and women cover their hair. I mean, the head. Why do Jewish people wear a head covering? Both men and women. The young girls who are not married don't wear head covering for a simple reason that they are supposed to look attractive to get married. But once a young lady gets married, she must cover her head just like a man. A Jewish man always has to have something on his head the whole day, whether he's sitting, walking, working, eating, he has to have something on his head. And a Jewish woman, from the moment she gets married, she has to cover her hair. And even according to Sephardi tradition, even an unmarried girl when she's praying or making blessings or studying Torah, she's supposed to have something on her head. That is why, according to Sephardic tradition, we have women's yarmulkes. We have women's special little hats that young ladies that are not married yet wear when they pray, learn Torah, or say blessings. And that is why, if you remember old grandmothers, when they hear words of Torah or when they hear a blessing, right away they take a napkin and they put on their head, or right away they take something and they put on their head. Why? You're surprised. They don't cover their hair. And even with that little napkin, doesn't cover all the whole head, all their hair. And the point is, they're not covering their head in order to cover their hair. They're covering their head because they heard a blessing, because they heard the words of Torah, and they know that out of respect, we have to cover our head. Now, where am I getting at? Why do Jewish men and women have to cover their head? And that is because we want to show that I don't end where my head ends. Where my physical head and where my physical hair ends, that's not the end of a human being. There's something beyond, and that is the soul. As we said, the soul occupies, only the tiny part of the soul occupies the body. Majority of the soul is above, spanning all spiritual worlds, all the way until the throne of glory of Hashem. So we cover the end of our head in order to show anyone who is looking at us, don't look at me as a physical body. I don't end where my physical body ends. So we cover the end of our body. So a Kohen is supposed to serve in Beit HaMikdash without shoes, so that there is a connection between his body and the holy ground of the temple. There should be no physical barrier. So as we read this Parashat Tetzaveh, we remember the lessons of Purim, that clothing hides the essence of the object. So too the events of our daily life might hide God's hand behind history. Another idea we have to keep in mind when we read Megillat Esther and many mentions of clothing, and when we read Parashat Tetzaveh, is that clothing is a symbol of modesty, because a person is different than an animal. A human being was created without wool, without thick hair covering his body. A human being needs protection of clothing. But that protection is not only for warmth or against heat or against wind or rain. Clothing was also designed by God to raise the status of a human being. The more clothing covers your body, the more dignified you look, the more respect and more dignity you have. And we see that, at least in the olden times. I'm not sure if that's still the rule. Stores, supermarkets had a rule that without t-shirt, you cannot enter the store. Or in the olden times, they had a rule that if you enter a government building, you have to have respectable clothing on, shoes, pants, shirt, tucked in, and jacket. And there was a rule that anyone that occupies public post must always wear suit and tie, and the higher you go, the more requirements they put on you. It used to be that the president of the United States was required to wear not only suit and tie, he also was required to wear a hat. Later, as the value of a human being decreased, as the respect for human being decreased, slowly the layers of clothing were shed, and slowly people start equating themselves to animals. So in Judaism, clothing has a very important meaning. Respect for the body, respect for other humans, and modesty. Okay, now let's begin the Parsha. We're on page 465 of Articles Chumash. First, we have the commandment to light the menorah. But before you light the menorah, you have to prepare the candles, and you have to prepare oil, special pure oil, to be lit in the menorah. So the verse says, verse 20, command the children of Israel, and they shall take for themselves pure olive oil, pressed for illumination, to kindle the menorah, the lamp, continually. Sons of Aharon shall arrange it from the evening until the morning. The menorah, the candelabra in the temple, was lit right before sunset, and it stayed lit until the morning, which means Kohanim put enough oil in each candle, in each lamp, to last the entire night. And then in the morning, if it goes out, it goes out. If it doesn't go out, then when the next afternoon comes, Kohanim come and they clean out the old wick, if there is any ash, and then they replace with a new wick, and they add oil, and then the Kohen lights the menorah again before sunset. Now we're going to chapter 28, verse 1. And here we learn about the garments, the vestments of Kohanim. Bring close to yourself Aharon, your brother, and his sons. And at this point, Aharon has 4 sons, Nadav, Avihu, Elazar, and Itamar. Later we'll learn about the death of his 2 sons, Nadav and Avihu. Verse 2, you shall make vestments, which means clothing, of sanctity for Aharon, your brother, for glory and splendor. That's what clothing is. Glory, it brings glory to the human being, and splendor. And find artisans, wise-hearted men who have a spirit of wisdom, and they shall make these vestments. What are these garments? Verse 4 lists them: the breastplate, the ephod, and we're going to speak about each one, the tunic, now we'll go to page 467, the turban means a hat, and a sash, and it refers to a belt. And on top of that, Kohen Gadol also wore pants, which are not listed here, they're listed elsewhere, as well as tzitz. Tzitz is a head plate, golden head plate. So the Kohen Gadol wore 8 garments. And a regular Kohen only wore 4 garments: the pants, the robe or the tunic, the belt, and a hat. Okay, now we start with the ephod, the apron, in verse 6. Make the ephod of gold, golden thread, turquoise wool, purple wool, scarlet wool, and twisted linen. So ephod was made from 5 different kinds of thread, including a golden thread. And it shall have 2 shoulder straps. So imagine a regular belt that goes around the lower half of your body with ties that you make a bow tie with, plus it had 2 shoulder straps going from the back and stopping at your shoulders. To these shoulder straps, later we'll learn, will be attached the breastplate of Kohen Gadol. Verse 8 describes the belt of the ephod. So Kohen Gadol had 2 belts. One, the belt on top of his long shirt, and another, the belt of the ephod. Now we're speaking about the belt of the ephod. The belt with which it is emplaced, tied onto your body, shall be of the same workmanship. It's also made from gold, turquoise, purple, and scarlet wool and twisted linen. And on each shoulder straps, there should be 2 shoham stones, 2 precious stones. And on each stone, you engrave the names of the children of Israel, which means the 12 tribes. 6 of the tribes are listed on one shoulder, 6 of the tribes are listed on the other shoulder. This may remind you of a general, and his shoulder insignia tells you which army he is part of and his status. So Kohen Gadol, on his shoulder straps, on the precious stone, had names of all 12 tribes to remind him that he is a representative of the Jewish people. He is there to do the service for the Jewish people. Now, the Talmud says that each one of the precious stones that were on the shoulder straps had 25 letters. 25 letters on one, 25 letters on the other. And the way it works out perfectly, 6 names of 6 tribes have 25 letters, and 6 names of the other 6 tribes form 25 other letters. Perfectly. Altogether, it's 50 letters. All the names of the 12 tribes together, you have 50 letters. That is the 50 gates of holiness. And these stones, how are they attached to the shoulder straps? They are encircled with gold setting. So the gold setting is attached to the shoulder strap, and the stone is attached to the gold, like a ring that of gold that surrounds the stone and holds it in place. Now we're on page 469, verse 12. You shall place both stones on the shoulder straps of the ephod, and they're called remembrance stones for the children of Israel. Aharon, or after him, every Kohen Gadol, shall carry their names before Hashem on both his shoulders as a remembrance. Verse 13. You shall make settings of gold for these shoham stones, and 2 chains of pure gold of braided craftsmanship, and place the braided chains on the settings. So the 2 shoulder straps come from the back and they end on the Kohen's shoulders. These shoulder straps have gold settings and precious stones on top. These gold settings are connected to golden chains, and the golden chains are connected to the breastplate, and they hold the breastplate. Verse 15 speaks about breastplate. You shall make the breastplate of judgment. This is called Choshen Mishpat. Why is it called the breastplate of judgment? Because inside this breastplate, the breastplate is folded. It's a square. If you unfold it, it's going to be like double square. And in between the folds, you put special name of Hashem. And when Kohen Gadol is asked a question, through the prophecy and through this breastplate of judgment, the judgment appears on the breastplate. And we're going to see how it happens. So, make a breastplate of judgment of a woven design. Similar craftsmanship like the ephod, like the apron, of gold, turquoise, purple, and scarlet wool, and linen. Twisted all together shall you make it. It shall be square, folded, half an amma length and half an amma height. That means you take your hand from the tip of your finger until your shoulder, and you take half of that. So this was approximate size of the breastplate. You shall fill it with stone mountings. Just like the shoulder straps, it had golden settings, 12 of them, 4 precious stones. 4 rows of stone. Each row had 3 stones, and you had 4 rows of 3 stones each, altogether 12. And it lists each stone by name. We don't know most of these names, and we'll just quickly say the names, but they might not mean anything to us. Odem pitda bareket, nofech sapir yahalon. Yahalon in modern Hebrew means diamond. Sapir means sapphire. Leshem shevo achlama. Tarshish, shoham, and yashfe. 12 precious stones set in gold shall they be. The stones shall be according to the names of the sons of Israel. So, just like the shoulder straps had precious stones, and on each precious stone you had 6 tribes listed, on each one together 12, so too on the breastplate you had 12 stones, each one corresponding to a tribe, and therefore you had the name of the tribe engraved in that stone. Stones shall be according to the names of the sons of Israel, 12 according to their names, engraved like a signet ring. Signet ring means in olden times they had a ring, and on it there was a reverse stamp with which it's called signet ring because you sign with it. You would dip it into soft wax or tar, any kind of soft material, and this ring would imprint your personal signature, which means the picture was indented in the ring. So too the names of the tribes were engraved in the stone. So the ephod, the breastplate, had 50 letters, which spell out all the names of 12 tribes. Now, when a person had a question to ask from God, he would phrase his question in front of Kohen Gadol, and he would receive an answer. The answer would be printed on the breastplate. The breastplate, you can imagine it was like a screen, like a computer screen, and the stones would light up, and each stone had letters, and the letters that are necessary for the answer would light up. and the Kohen Gadol would look at the letters that lit up, and he would combine them to form words and sentences. And that would serve as an answer to the person who asked the question. Okay, now we're on in verse 23. We said that there are two golden chains connecting the shoulder settings with precious stones to the breastplates. For the breastplate, you shall make 2 rings of gold at each top corner, and you shall place the 2 rings of the 2 ends of the breastplate, and you shall place the 2 golden ropes on the 2 rings. So again, you had the ephod, the apron. Apron had shoulder straps ended with golden settings, with precious stones, with 6 tribes on each. And these settings were connected to golden chains, which were connected to 2 golden rings, and the 2 golden rings were attached to 2 ends, 2 corners, 2 upper corners of the breastplate of Kohen Gadol. And you shall make, in verse 26, 2 additional rings of gold and place them at the bottom, 2 bottom corners of the breastplate. Now we turn to page 471, verse 28. They shall attach the breastplate from its rings to the rings of the ephod with a turquoise woolen cord. So on the bottom, the 2 golden rings were connected to 2 turquoise wool strings that connected it to the bottom part of the apron. So the breastplate was hanging on golden ropes to attach to the shoulder straps, and on the bottom, it was attached with turquoise wool so that it shouldn't move horizontally. It should be tight, and it shouldn't fall down. It's attached with golden cords. Now, we go to verse 30, and now we speak about Urim v'Tumim. This is the name of Hashem that is placed in the fold of the breastplate. Into the breastplate of judgment shall you place the Urim and the Tumim, and they shall be on Aharon's heart when he comes before Hashem. And Aharon shall bear the judgment of the children of Israel on his heart constantly before Hashem. Why are they called Urim and Tumim? They're called Urim because that comes from the word Or. Urim are lights because they light up, and Tumim comes from the word Tam, perfect, which means they give enlightenment, they give perfect answer. Whoever asks them, but only you're only allowed to ask them a question that relates to the nation, to the entire Jewish people. So only a prophet or a king or Kohen Gadol himself could ask the Urim Tumim question. So usually they would ask that Urim Tumim if they needed to go to war or they needed to make an important political decision that would affect the whole nation. Now in verse 31, we go to the Me'il, the robe. You shall make the robe of the ephod entirely of turquoise wool, and its head opening was folded, and it had a border all around, so that when the Kohen Gadol wears it, it should not be torn. And that is, in fact, a negative commandment that we're not allowed to tear garments of Kohen Gadol. And what was on the bottom of the Me'il, the the turquoise wool robe. Verse 33, you shall make on its hem. Hem means the bottom part of the robe. Pomegranates, special woven pomegranates that are made from turquoise, purple, and scarlet wool, all around the bottom part of the robe. Now we're on page 473. And gold bells between them all around. So the hem of Kohen Gadol, which was golden, turquoise wool, had on it beautiful pomegranates made of turquoise, purple, and scarlet wool. Little balls look like pomegranates, and in between the woolen pomegranates, you have golden bells. Verse 35, it must be on Aharon in order to minister, which means Aharon or any Kohen Gadol after him had to wear all 8 garments in order to minister. And what is the purpose of these bells? Its sound shall be heard when he enters the sanctuary before Hashem and when he leaves, so that he not die. When we enter a room, before we go in, we have to knock on the door. In fact, Halakha says that even when a person enters his own house, he must knock first in order to let people know that he's coming in, not to catch them by surprise. All the more so, when you enter king's palace, you have to announce yourself. And certainly when you enter the house of God. So when Kohen Gadol enters the sanctuary, he has to make noise. And this noise was made by the bells on his robe. This is similar to the bells that we find on our Sefer Torah. As we carry the Sefer Torah, there are what we call rimonim, golden, little golden crowns that we put on Sefer Torah. And as we carry the Sefer Torah from the Aron HaKodesh, from the Ark to the Bima, the bells make noise. Why? In order to inform people to rise, that Sefer Torah is being carried. So too, as Kohen Gadol goes into the sanctuary, the bells on his robe make noise. Again, Hashem sees everything. He doesn't need to hear the noise, but still we behave towards Hashem with the same respect as we would give to a king. Now we are in verse 36. We're speaking about tzitz, the golden head plate that Kohen Gadol wore. You shall make a head plate of pure gold, and you shall engrave upon it holy to Hashem. It should say Kodesh and Hashem's name. Kodesh la Hashem. Some say it was written on one line, some say it was written on 2 lines with the word Hashem higher, Kodesh, Le, and Hashem's name. You shall place it on a cord of turquoise wool, and it shall be on the turban, on the head, which means the head plate was connected above and on sides with turquoise wool. And it was on top of the turban, the hat that Kohen Gadol wore. And between the hat and the head plate, there was space for tefillin, because even Kohen Gadol wore tefillin. In the olden times, the Jewish men wore tefillin the entire day. And even Kohanim, and even Kohen Gadol, while wearing the garments, the priestly garments, they would also wear tefillin. So there was exactly the space for tefillin between the head plate and the turban. Okay, now, why do we need the head plate? Verse 38 explains, it shall be on Aharon's forehead, so that Aharon shall bring forgiveness for a sin regarding the sacred offerings that the children of Israel consecrate. And it shall be on his forehead always to bring them favor before Hashem. So the Gemara teaches us that when Kohen Gadol wore this head plate, if there was any mistake in the offering was accepted. After the fact, the offering was accepted anyway. So the head plate that said Kodesh Lashem, it's holy for Hashem, atoned for any wrong thought or a mistake that was performed in the offering. Now in verse 39, we speak about the tunic, which is called ketonet. You shall make a linen tunic of a box-like knit, basically like an undershirt. And now we speak about the hat. You shall make a linen turban. So we see that some garments of Kohanim were wool, some were linen, some were combination of wool and linen, which means they were shatnez. But during the service, Kohanim were allowed to wear these garments, which are shatnez, because when you're doing a mitzvah, at the same time, when there's a prohibition, the Torah allows you to ignore the prohibition. For example, a man who has tzitzit made out of linen, but the techelet, the blue wool, is wool, he is allowed to put the wool on the linen, even though it's shatnez, because he's fulfilling the mitzvah of tzitzit with it. So too, Kohen Gadol, or regular Kohen, according to some opinions, that has shatnez in their clothing, are allowed to wear it because they are serving God at that time. And now we speak about belts. And in English, it's called sash. And make them sashes. And make sash of embroider's work. Now we speak about the four vestments, the four garments of ordinary Kohanim, Kohen Hedyot. For the son, we're in verse 40. For the sons of Aharon, you shall make tunics, the undershirts, and make them sashes, belts, and you shall make them head dress, hat, for glory and splendor. And it doesn't mention pants, both for Kohen Gadol and for regular Kohanim. They wore pants under the robe. With them you shall dress Aharon, your brother, and his sons, and you shall anoint them, which means you pour olive oil on their head, inaugurate them and sanctify them, and they shall minister to me. Now we're on page 475. And in verse 42, we actually speak about the pants. You shall make them linen breeches, an English word for hands, to cover the flesh of their nakedness. From the hips to their thighs shall they be. So they were like long shorts. Now we're in chapter 29, the inauguration ritual. We briefly spoke about it on previous page. You shall dress them, you shall anoint them, and inaugurate them. This is the method that you shall do for them to sanctify them to minister to me. So they had to bring special inauguration offerings. What are they composed of? Take one young bull, 2 rams, unleavened breads, unleavened loaves mixed with oil, unleavened wafers smeared with oil, and place them in a single basket and bring them in the basket with the bull and the 2 rams. The Kohanim have to dip in a mikveh. You shall take the vestments, the garments, and dress Aharon with his 8 garments and his sons with their 4 garments, and you shall take the anointment oil and pour it on his head and anoint him. And the same you shall do for his sons. They have to go to the mikveh and wear 4 garments. Now, the Kohen Gadol is anointed with olive oil. Anointment in Hebrew is Meshicha. That is why the Kohen Gadol is called Kohen Mashiach, which means the anointed Kohen. Regular Kohanim are not anointed, and that is why our Messiah we call Mashiach. The word Messiah is an English pronunciation of the word Mashiach, which means the anointed one, because we use this anointment oil to inaugurate kings and Kohen Gadol. So since Mashiach is going to be our king, he will be anointed. So Mashiach means the anointed one, the one that is prepared for greatness. Now, we are on page 477. It describes in verse 10 how you shall offer the bull sin offering. And then we go to verse 15. It describes the first ram offering, which is olah, completely burnt offering, elevation offering. Then we go to verse 19, the second ram, which is called the ram of inauguration, El Hamiluim. And here there is some ritual that involves Kohanim, and we're going to read about it. Take some blood of the ram that you slaughtered, the inauguration ram, and place the blood on the middle part of the ear of Aharon, of his right ear, and on the middle part of the ear of his sons, the right one. So we take the blood of the ram and we put it on the right ear. And we put some more blood and we put it on the thumb of their right hand and on the big toe of their right foot. And the rest of the blood we throw on the altar all around. And then we take some of the blood that is on the altar and some of the anointment oil, and we sprinkle it on the Aharon and his garments and on his sons and their garments. And they shall become holy. And then certain sacrificial parts of the ram we burn on the altar. And then we offer the mincha offering, the loaves of bread that we mentioned, and the wafers from before. We are on page 479. The Aharon and his sons, they take the wafers and the loaves in a basket, and they wave it together. Okay. And they take parts of the inauguration ram and they hold it together and they wave it at the same time. Now, we go to verse 29. What happens if one Kohen Gadol dies? For example, when Aharon died, what happened to his garments? Verse 29 says, the holy vestments of Aharon shall belong to his sons after him, to become elevated through them, to become inaugurated through them. And the inauguration period lasts for 7 days. Now, verse 31 explains the process of cooking and eating the flesh of inauguration ram. Part of it was offered on the altar, and part of it was eaten by Kohanim. You shall take the inauguration ram and cook its flesh in a holy place. Aaron and his sons shall eat the flesh of the ram and the bread that is in the basket before the tent, the entrance of the tent of meeting. Now we go to verse 35 that describes the 7-day inauguration period. Do this for Aaron and his sons for a 7-day period. Verse 36, a bull sin offering you shall make each day. Now we're on page 481. For a 7-day period shall you bring atonement for the altar and sanctify it. The altar shall be holy of holies. Whatever touches the altar shall become sanctified. Now, in verse 38, we learn about the tamid offering, the continual daily offering that was brought in the morning and in the afternoon. One sheep in the morning and one sheep in the afternoon. Verse 38, this is what you shall offer upon the altar. 2 sheep within the first year, every day continually. 1 sheep in the morning and 2nd sheep in the afternoon. And 1/10 of a ephah, which is a measure of fine flour, mixed with a 1/4 hin, which is another measure, hin, of beaten oil. And a libation means pouring wine on the altar, of a 1/4 hin of wine for each sheep. Verse 42, as a continual elevation offering for your generations, which means this tamid was brought every day, weekdays, Shabbat, holidays, forever. 2 lambs. And now, once everything is completed, we're in verse 43, I shall set my meeting there with the children of Israel, and it shall be sanctified with my glory. I shall sanctify the tent of meeting and the altar, and Aaron and his sons. Verse 45, I shall rest my presence among the children of Israel, and I shall be their God. Through the Beit HaMikdash, the Mishkan, and the service in it, divine presence, the Shekhinah, rests on the Jewish people. They shall know that I am Hashem, their God, who took them out of the land of Egypt to rest my presence among them. I am Hashem, their God. How do we know that God is with us? When we have at the temple, we see divine presence. How do we see it? It says that there was a cloud resting above the Holy of Holies. Now we are on page 483, and here we learn about the second altar. The first altar we learned about last week, the elevation, it's called Mizbach HaOlah, the elevation altar, which was made of wood covered with copper, and inside was earth. Now we learn about the incense altar, which is called Mizbach HaKetoret. Verse 1, chapter 30. You shall make an altar on which to bring incense up in smoke. Of acacia wood shall you make it. And its length is 1 cubit and width is 1 cubit, and its height is 2 cubits. Each cubit is 1.5 feet. From it shall its horns be. Just like the large copper altar, this golden altar also has 4 horn-like formations on the corners. You shall cover it with pure gold. its roof and its walls all around, and its horns. And you shall make for it a golden crown. And it also had 2 rings. And in these 2 rings, verse 5 says, you shall make the staves, the poles of acacia wood, and cover them with gold. And place the altar before the partition, before the parochet that is by the ark of the testimonial tablets. Verse 7 describes what is done with this altar. Upon it shall Aharon bring the spice incense up in smoke every morning. When he cleans the lamps, he shall bring it up in smoke. So every morning there is a ketoret burning on the Mizbeach. And verse 8 says, when Aharon kindles the lamps in the afternoon, he shall bring it up in smoke. So every morning and every afternoon, Kohen would burn ketoret on the golden altar. This altar is only for incense, for ketoret. We're not allowed to burn on it any sacrificial parts of animals. Verse 10 describes the Yom Kippur service that is done on this altar. Aharon shall bring atonement upon its horns once a year, from the blood of the sin offering of the atonements once a year. Shall he bring atonement upon it for your generations? It is holy of holies to Hashem. This concludes Parsha Tetzaveh. Thank you for listening. May we all stay healthy and celebrate Purim with our friends and family safely. Everyone should stay healthy after Purim as well. The entire Jewish nation should rejoice, and may we see Mashiach soon, and may we rebuild the Beit HaMikdash and serve Hashem together in Yerushalayim. Thank you for listening. All the best, Purim Sameach, and Shabbat Shalom.